Hey, everybody. This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good looking friends. Take in this beautiful photo with Princess Catherine and the children looking happy and all is well in the world. Embrace yourselves because the onslaught of the Sussex PR machine has been kicked into full effect. The gloves are off. Duchess of Sussex wastes no time in making sure that her smug-looking face is in every media newspaper here in the United States, as well as broadcasted on TV. However, nobody is asking why isn't Murchie with her, considering that she had been walking on May 6th. I thought she had a big birthday bash to plan. Apparently not. I think we can all agree that the more she does this, the more validation that we have in our heads that there's something fundamentally wrong with this woman and she needs to get help. This looks like she is on the verge of a total breakdown. Why would you leave your house looking like this? And on top of that, the people that you're paying to take these stage photos make them look worse than you. This is not a good look in any way, shape, or form. Anyhow, the Sussex machine, under new PR management, has begun the onslaught of saturating the media once again. So not only do we have a Meghan Markle sighting hiking, we now have Harry's PR set up to keep the book Spare alive, as well as continue pushing this narrative for Harry on the cruel British tabloids. We have now Harry's ghostwriter, J.R. Moehringer, writing a piece for New Yorker magazine. Now, for those that don't know, the New Yorker is owned by Condé Nast, and as you can see from this chart, you know where this is going. How much money do we think the Harkles paid this author to go ahead and write this piece that you're about to listen to? Out of the blue, J.R. Moehringer, Harry's ghostwriter for Spare, decides to write a piece for The New Yorker, talking about his experience and how he became a ghostwriter and his time that he spent with Harry in writing Spare. Now, I have stated this when they announced that J.R. Moehringer was going to be the ghostwriter for Harry, that I particularly did not like this author because I hated the book Shoe Dog. Well, this article that he writes even confirms it for me even more that this guy is way out there, and it makes sense that Harry chose him to write his book. So, in this article, and I went ahead and cut some of it out to kind of make it shorter because it's about 48 minutes long. He talks about how he becomes a ghostwriter and why he does it. And he goes into talking about how he got the ghostwriting for Andre Agassi and then into Shoe Dog. And then where I include for you guys to hear is just the parts around his engagement with Harry. Well, what I can tell you is that this guy does admit that, he can be whoever he wants as a ghostwriter and that he's free to write how he feels like writing. So, in my mind, I think he was pretty okay with writing all these lies that were in Harry's book and making it sound so fantasy like. You know how we always say that birds of a feather flock together? Well, you guessed it. This guy actually said in this article that he is a narcissist. And what I find interesting is that there is this need he has to go ahead and defend his writing, just like how Meghan and Harry do for everything that they put out, justifying why they're right and continuing with these false narratives. It was very clear that he was affected by the tweet that he put out when the book was published around his writing. And I do believe that he was extremely upset over it because his credibility as a writer was challenged. Actually, it's now in the garbage, in my opinion. And this article even confirms it that much more because you can see the delusion as well as the fantasy that he is writing behind. And When you listen to the certain segments when he talks about his time with Harry, he is in line with the script of the Harkles strategy. And what I mean by that is the focus is on the evil British tabloids and how awful they are and ruthless in twisting words and narratives and how his privacy was invaded, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm not surprised that this has been posted now because on Wednesday, guess what? We have more in your face Harkles because Harry will be in court testifying. Before we listen to parts of this article, I just want to preface I totally understand if you can't make it through this video because myself found it very difficult. I absolutely hate the writing of this author. Hate it.
Autumn presents
Personal History, published in the print issue of The New Yorker with the headline The Ghostwriter, written by J.R. Moringer, read by Eric Jason Martin. I was exasperated with Prince Harry. My head was pounding, my jaw was clenched, and I was starting to raise my voice. And yet some part of me was still able to step outside the situation and think, this is so weird. I'm shouting at Prince Harry. Then, as Harry started going back at me, as his cheeks flushed and his eyes narrowed, a more pressing thought occurred. Whoa, it could all end right here. This was the summer of 2022. For 2 years, I'd been the ghostwriter on Harry's memoir, Spare, and now, reviewing his latest edits in a middle-of-the-night Zoom session, we'd come to a difficult passage. Harry, at the close of grueling military exercises in rural England, gets captured by pretend terrorists. It's a simulation, but the tortures inflicted upon Harry are very real. He's hooded, dragged to an underground bunker, beaten, frozen, starved, stripped, forced into excruciating stress positions by captors wearing black balaclavas. The idea is to find out if Harry has the toughness to survive an actual capture on the battlefield. 2 of his fellow soldiers don't, they crack. At last, Harry's captors throw him against a wall, choke him, and scream insults into his face, culminating in a vile dig at Princess Diana? Even the fake terrorists engrossed in their parts, even the hardcore British soldiers observing from a remote location, seem to recognize that an inviolate rule has been broken. Clawing that specific wound, the memory of Harry's dead mother, is out of bounds. When the simulation is over, one of the participants extends an apology. Harry always wanted to end this scene with a thing he said to his captors, a comeback that struck me as unnecessary and somewhat inane. Good for Harry that he had the nerve, but ending with what he said would dilute the scene's meaning. That even at the most bizarre and peripheral moments of his life, his central tragedy intrudes. For months, I'd been crossing out the comeback, and for months, Harry had been pleading for it to go back in. Now he wasn't pleading, he was insisting, and it was 2 a.m., and I was starting to lose it. I said, "Dude, we've been over this." Why was this one line so important? Why couldn't he accept my advice? We were leaving out 1,000 other things. That's half the art of memoir, leaving stuff out. So what made this different? "Please," I said, "trust me. Trust the book." Although this wasn't the first time that Harry and I had argued, it felt different. It felt as if we were hurtling towards some kind of decisive rupture, in part because Harry was no longer saying anything. He was just glaring into the camera. Finally, he exhaled and calmly explained that all his life, people had belittled his intellectual capabilities, and this flash of cleverness proved that, even after being kicked and punched and deprived of sleep and food, he had his wits about him. "Oh," I said. "Okay." It made sense now. But I still refused. "Why?" "Because," I told him, "everything you just said is about you. You want the world to know that you did a good job, that you were smart. But, strange as it may seem, memoir isn't about you. It's not even the story of your life. It's a story carved from your life, a particular series of events chosen because they have the greatest resonance for the widest range of people. And at this point in the story, those people don't need to know anything more than that your captors said a cruel thing about your mom. Harry looked down. A long time. Was he thinking? Seething? Should I have been more diplomatic? Should I have just given in? I imagined I'd be thrown off the book soon after sunup. I could almost hear the awkward phone call with Harry's agent, and I was sad. Never mind the financial hit. I was focused on the emotional shock. All the time, the effort, the intangibles I'd invested in Harry's memoir, in Harry, would be gone. Just like that. After what seemed like an hour, Harry looked up, and we locked eyes. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Yes, I get it." "Thank you, Harry," I said, relieved. He shot me a mischievous grin. "I really enjoy getting you worked up like that." I burst into laughter and shook my head, and we moved on to his next set of edits. Later that morning, after a few hours of sleep, I sat outside, worrying. Mornings are my worry time, along with afternoons and evenings. I didn't worry so much about the propriety of arguing with princes, or even the risks. One of a ghostwriter's main jobs is having a big mouth. You win some, you lose most, but you have to keep pushing, not unlike a demanding parent or a tyrannical coach. Otherwise, you're nothing but a glorified stenographer, and that's disloyalty to the author, to the book, to books. "Opposition is true friendship," William Blake wrote, and if I had to choose a ghostwriting credo, that would be it. No, rather than the rightness of going after Harry, I was questioning the heat with which I'd done so. I scolded myself. It's not your comeback. It's not your mother. For the 1,000th time in my ghostwriting career, I reminded myself, it's not your effing book. Some days, the phone doesn't stop. Ghostwriters in distress. They ask for 10 minutes, half an hour, a coffee date. My author can't remember squat. My author and I have come to despise each other. I can't get my author to call me back. Is it normal for a ghost to get ghosted? At the outset, I do what ghostwriters do. I listen. And eventually, after the callers talk themselves out, I ask a few gentle questions. The first, aside from, "How did you get this number?" is always, "How bad do you want it?" Because things can go sideways in a hurry. An author might know nothing about writing, which is why he hired a ghost. But he may also have the literary self-confidence of Saul Bellow, and good luck telling Saul Bellow that he absolutely may not describe an interesting bowel movement he experienced years ago, as I once had to tell an author. So fight like crazy, I say, but always remember that if push comes to shove, no one will have your back. Within the text and without, no one wants to hear from the dumb ghostwriter. I try not to sound didactic. A lot of what I've read about ghostwriting, much of it from accomplished ghostwriters, doesn't square with my experience. Recording the author? Terrible idea. It makes many authors feel as if they're being deposed. Dressing like the author? It's a memoir, not a masquerade party. The ghostwriter for Julian Assange wrote 25,000 words about his methodology, and it sounded to me like Elon Musk on mushrooms, on Mars. That same ghost, however, published a review of Spare describing Harry as off his royal tits and me as going all Sartre or Faulkner, so what do I know? Who am I to offer rules? Maybe the alchemy of each ghost-author pairing is unique. Therefore, I simply remind the callers that ghostwriting is an art, and urge them not to let those who cast it as hacky, shady, or faddish — it's been around for thousands of years — dim their pride. I also tell them that they're providing a vital public service, helping to shore up the publishing industry, since most of the titles on this week's bestseller list were written by someone besides the named author. Signing off, the callers usually sigh and say thanks and grumble something like, "Well, whatever happens, I'm never doing this again." And I tell them yes, they will, and wish them luck. What I did best, I discovered, was write for others. The gossip columnist spent most nights in downtown saloons hunting for scoops, and some mornings he'd shuffle into the newsroom looking rough. One morning, he fixed his red eyes on me, gestured toward his notes, and rasped, "Would you?" I sat at his desk and dashed off his column in 20 minutes. What a rush. Writing under no name was safe. Writing under someone else's name and picture was hedonic, a kind of hiding and seeking. Words had never come easy for me, but when I wrote as someone else, the words, the jokes, the patter, it didn't stop. Open, by Andre Agassi, was published on November 9th, 2009. Andre was pleased, reviewers were complimentary, and I soon had offers to ghost other people's memoirs. Before deciding what to do next, I needed to get away, clear my head. I went to the Green Mountains. For 2 days, I drove around, stopped at wayside meadows, sat under trees, and watched the clouds. Until one late afternoon, I began feeling unwell. I bought some cold medicine, pulled into the first bed and breakfast I saw, and climbed into bed. Hand-sewn quilt under my chin, I switched on the TV. There was Andre, on a late-night talk show. The host was praising Open, and Agassi was being his typical charming, humble self. Now the host was praising the writing. Agassi continued to be humble. Thank you, thank you. But I dared to hope he might mention me? An indefensible, illogical hope. Andre had asked me to put my name on the cover, and I'd declined. Nevertheless, right before zonking out, I started muttering at the TV. Say my name. I got a bit louder. Say my name. I got pretty rowdy. Say my fucking name! 7 hours later, I stumbled downstairs to the breakfast room and caught a weird vibe. Guests stared. Several peered over my shoulder to see who was with me. What the? I sat alone, eating some pancakes, until I got it. The bed and breakfast had to be 300 years old, with walls made of pre-revolutionary cardboard. Clearly, every guest had heard me. Say my name. I took it as a lesson. NyQuil was to blame, but also creeping narcissism. The gods were admonishing me. You can't be Mr. Rogers while ghosting the book, and John McEnroe when it's done. I drove away from Vermont with newfound clarity. I'm not cut out for this ghostwriting thing. I needed to get back to my first love, journalism, and to writing my own books. During the next year or so, I freelanced for magazines while making notes for a novel. Then once more to the wilderness. I rented a tiny cabin in the far corner of nowhere, and for a full winter, rarely left. No TV, no radio, no Wi-Fi. For entertainment, I listened to the silver foxes screaming at night in a nearby forest, and I read dozens of books. But mostly I sat before the wood stove and tried to inhabit the minds of my characters. The novel was historical fiction, based on the decades-long crime spree of America's most prolific bank robber, but also based on my disgust with the bankers who had recently devastated the global financial system. In real life, my bank-robbing protagonist wrote a memoir with a ghostwriter, which was full of lies or delusions. I thought it might be fascinating to override that memoir with solid research, overwrite the ghostwriter, and become, in effect, the ghostwriter of the ghostwriter of a ghost. I gave everything I had to that novel, but when it was published in 2012, it got mauled by an influential critic. The review was then instantly tweeted by countless humanitarians, often with side-splitting commentary like, "Ouch." I was on book tour at the time, and read the review in a pitch-dark hotel room, knowing full well what it meant. The book was stillborn. I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand. Part of me wanted to never leave that room. Part of me never did. I barely slept or ate for months. My savings ran down. Occasionally, I'd take on a freelance assignment, profile an athlete for a magazine, but mostly, I was in hibernation. Then one day the phone rang. A soft voice, vaguely familiar. Andre, asking if I was up for working with someone on a memoir. Who? Phil Knight? Who? Andre sighed. Founder of Nike? A business book didn't seem like my thing, but I needed to do something, and writing my own stuff was out. I went to the initial meeting thinking, it's only an hour of my life. It wound up being 3 years. Luckily, Phil had no interest in doing the typical CEO auto-hagiography. He'd sought writing advice from Tobias Wolff. He was pals with a Pulitzer-winning novelist. He wanted to write a literary memoir, unfolding his mistakes, his anxieties, his quest. He viewed entrepreneurship and sports as a spiritual search. He'd read deeply in Taoism and Zen. Since I, too, was in search of meaning, I thought his book might be just the thing I needed. It was. It was also, in every sense of that overused phrase, a labor of love. I married the book's editor. When Shoe Dog was published, in April 2016, I reflected on the dire warnings I'd heard at Super Bowl 42 and thought, what were they talking about? I felt like a guy, warned off by a bunch of wizened gamblers, who hits the jackpot twice with the first 2 nickels he sticks into a slot machine. Then again, I figured, better quit while I'm ahead. Back to magazine writing. I also dared to start another novel. More personal, more difficult than the last. It absorbed me totally, and I was tunneling toward a draft while also starting a family. There was no time for anything else, no desire. And yet, some days, I'd hear that siren call. An actor, an activist, a billionaire, a soldier, a politician, another billionaire, a lunatic would phone, seeking help with a memoir. Twice I said yes. Not for the money. I've never taken a ghosting gig for the money. But twice I felt that I had no choice, that the story was too cool, the author just too compelling, and twice the author freaked out at my first draft. Twice I explained that first drafts are always flawed, that error is the mother of truth, but it wasn't just the errors. It was the confessions, the revelations, the cold-blooded honesty that memoir requires. Everyone says they want to get raw until they see how raw feels. Twice the author killed the book. Twice I sat before a stack of pages into which I'd poured my soul and years of my life, knowing they were good, and knowing that they were about to go into a drawer forever. Twice I said to my wife, never again. And then, in the summer of 2020, I got a text. The familiar query, would you be interested in speaking with someone about ghosting a memoir? I shook my head no. I covered my eyes. I picked up the phone and heard myself blurting, who? Prince Harry. I agreed to a Zoom. I was curious, of course. Who wouldn't be? I wondered what the real story was. I wondered if we'd have any chemistry. We did. And there was, I think, a surprising reason. Princess Diana had died 23 years before our first conversation, and my mother, Dorothy Moringer, had just died, and our griefs felt equally fresh. Still, I hesitated. Harry wasn't sure how much he wanted to say in his memoir, and that concerned me. I'd heard similar reservations early on from both authors who'd ultimately killed their memoirs. Also, I knew that whatever Harry said, whenever he said it, would set off a storm. I am not, by nature, a storm chaser. And there were logistical considerations. In the early stages of a global pandemic, it was impossible to predict when I'd be able to sit down with Harry in the same room. How do you write about someone you can't meet? Harry had no deadline, however, and that enticed me. Many authors are in a hot hurry, and some ghosts are happy to oblige. They churn and burn, producing 3 or 4 books a year. I go painfully slow. I don't know any other way. Also, I just liked the dude. I called him Dude right away. It made him chuckle. I found his story, as he outlined it in broad strokes, relatable and infuriating. The way he'd been treated, by both strangers and intimates, was grotesque. In retrospect, though, I think I selfishly welcomed the idea of being able to speak with someone, an expert, about that never-ending feeling of wishing you could call your mom. Harry and I made steady progress in the course of 2020, largely because the world didn't know what we were up to. We could revel in the privacy of our Zoom bubble. As Harry grew to trust me, he brought other people into the bubble, connecting me with his inner circle, a vital phase in every ghosting job. There is always someone who knows your author's life better than he does, and your task is to find that person fast and interview his socks off. As the pandemic waned, I was finally able to travel to Montecito. I went once with my wife and children. Harry won the heart of my daughter, Gracie, with his vast Moana scholarship. His favorite scene, he told her, is when Hey, the silly chicken, finds himself lost at sea. I also went twice by myself. Harry put me up in his guest house, where Megan and Archie would visit me on their afternoon walks. Megan, knowing I was missing my family, was forever bringing trays of food and sweets. Little by little, Harry and I amassed hundreds of thousands of words. When we weren't Zooming or phoning, we were texting around the clock. In due time, no subject was off the table. I felt honored by his candor, and I could tell that he felt astonished by it, and energized. While I always emphasized storytelling and scenes, Harry couldn't escape the wish that Spare might be a rebuttal to every lie ever published about him. As Borges dreamed of endless libraries, Harry dreams of endless retractions, which meant no end of revelations. He knew, of course, that some people would be aghast at first. Why on earth would Harry talk about that? But he had faith that they would soon see, because someone else already talked about it and got it wrong. He was joyful at this prospect. Everything in our bubble was good. Then someone leaked news of the book. Whoever it was, their callousness toward Harry extended to me. I had a clause in my contract giving me the right to remain unidentified, a clause I always insist on, but the leaker blew that up by divulging my name to the press. Along with pretty much anyone who has had anything to do with Harry, I woke one morning to find myself squinting into a gigantic searchlight. Every hour, another piece would drop, each one wrong. My fee was wrong. My bio was wrong. Even my name. One royal expert cautioned that, because of my involvement in the book, Harry's father should be looking for a pile of coats to hide under. When I mentioned this to Harry, he stared. Why? Because I have daddy issues. We laughed and got back to discussing our mothers. The genesis of my relationship with Harry was constantly misreported. Harry and I were introduced by George Clooney, the British newspapers proclaimed, even though I've never met George Clooney. Yes, he was directing a film based on my memoir, but I've never been in the man's presence, never communicated with him in any way. I wanted to correct the record, write an op-ed or something, tweet some facts. But no, I reminded myself, ghosts don't speak. One day, though, I did share my frustration with Harry. I bemoaned that these fictions about me were spreading and hardening into orthodoxy. He tilted his head. Welcome to my world, dude. By now, Harry was calling me dude. A week before its pub date, Spare was leaked. A Madrid bookshop reportedly put embargoed copies of the Spanish version on its shelves by accident, and reporters descended. In no time, Fleet Street had assembled crews of translators to reverse engineer the book from Spanish to English, and with so many translators working on tight deadline, the results read like bad Borat. One example among many was the passage about Harry losing his virginity. Per the British press, Harry recounts, "I mounted her quickly." But of course he doesn't. I can assert with 100% confidence that no one gets mounted, quickly or otherwise, in Spare. I didn't have time to be horrified. When the book was officially released, the bad translations didn't stop. They multiplied. The British press now converted the book into their native tongue, that jabberwocky of bonkers hot takes and classist snark. Facts were wrenched out of context, complex emotions were reduced to cartoonish idiocy, innocent passages were hyped into outrages, and there were so many falsehoods. One British newspaper chased down Harry's flight instructor. Headline, "Prince Harry's army instructor says story in Spare book is complete fantasy." Hours later, the instructor posted a lengthy comment beneath the article, swearing that those words, complete fantasy, never came out of his mouth. Indeed, they were nowhere in the piece, only in the bogus headline, which had gone viral. The newspaper had made it up, the instructor said, stressing that Harry was one of his finest students. The only other time I'd witnessed this sort of frenzied mob was with LeBron James, whom I'd interviewed before and after his decision to leave the Cleveland Cavaliers and join the Miami Heat. I couldn't fathom the toxic cloud of hatred that trailed him. Fans, particularly Cavs loyalists, didn't just decry James. They wished him dead. They burned his jersey, threw rocks at his image, and the media egged them on. In those first days of Spare, I found myself wondering what the ecstatic contempt for Prince Harry and King James had in common. Racism, surely. Also, each man had committed the sin of publicly spurning his homeland. But the biggest factor, I came to believe, was money. In times of great economic distress, many people are triggered by someone who has so much, doing anything to try to improve his lot. Within days, the amorphous campaign against Spare seemed to narrow to a single point of attack, that Harry's memoir, rigorously fact-checked, was rife with errors. I can't think of anything that rankles quite like being called sloppy by people who routinely trample facts in pursuit of their royal prey. And this now happened every few minutes to Harry, and by extension to me. In one section of the book, for instance, Harry reveals that he used to live for the yearly sales at TK Maxx, the discount clothing chain. "Not so fast," said the monarchists at TK Maxx Corporate, who rushed out a statement declaring that TK Maxx never has sales, just great savings all the time. Oh, snap. Gotcha, Prince George Santos. Except that people around the world immediately posted screenshots of TK Maxx touting sales on its official Twitter account. Surely TK Maxx's effort to discredit Harry's memoir was unrelated to the company's long-standing partnership with Prince Charles and his charitable trust. Ghostwriters don't speak, I reminded myself over and over. But I had to do something. So I ventured one small gesture. I retweeted a few quotes from Mary Carr about inadvertent error in memories and memoir, plus seemingly innocuous quotes from Spare about the way Harry's memory works. He can't recall much from the years right after his mother died, and for the most part remembers places better than people, possibly because places didn't let him down the way people did. Smooth move, Ghostwriter. My tweets were seized upon, deliberately misinterpreted by trolls, and turned into headlines by real news outlets. Harry's ghostwriter admits the book is all lies. One of Harry's friends gave a book party. My wife and I attended. We were feeling fragile as we arrived, and it had nothing to do with Twitter. Days earlier, we'd been stalked, followed in our car as we drove our son to preschool. When I lifted him out of his seat, a paparazzo leaped from his car and stood in the middle of the road, taking aim with his enormous lens and scaring the hell out of everyone at drop-off. Then, not 1 hour later, as I sat at my desk, trying to calm myself, I looked up to see a woman's face at my window. As if in a dream, I walked to the window and asked, "Who are you?" Through the glass, she whispered, "I'm from the Mail on Sunday." I lowered the shade, phoned an old friend, the same friend whose columns I used to ghostwrite in Colorado. He listened, but didn't get it. How could he get it? So I called the only friend who might. It was like telling Taylor Swift about a bad breakup. It was like singing Hallelujah to Leonard Cohen. Harry was all heart. He asked if my family was okay, asked for physical descriptions of the people harassing us, promised to make some calls, see if anything could be done. We both knew nothing could be done, but still, I felt gratitude and some regret. I'd worked hard to understand the ordeals of Harry Windsor, and now I saw that I understood nothing. Empathy is thin gruel compared with the marrow of experience. One morning of what Harry had endured since birth made me desperate to take another crack at the pages in Spare that talk about the media. Too late. The book was out, the party in full swing. As we walked into the house, I looked around, nervous, unsure of what state we'd find the author in. Was he, too, feeling fragile? Was he as keen as I was to organize a global boycott of TK Maxx? He appeared, marching toward us, looking flushed. Uh-oh, I thought, before registering that it was a good flush. His smile was wide as he embraced us both. He was overjoyed by many things. The numbers, naturally. Guinness World Records had just certified his memoir as the fastest-selling non-fiction book in the history of the world. But more than that, readers were reading, at last, the actual book, not Murdoch chunks laced with poison, and their online reviews were overwhelmingly effusive. Many said Harry's candor about family dysfunction, about losing a parent, had given them solace. The guests were summoned into the living room. There were several lovely toasts to Harry. Then the prince stepped forward. I'd never seen him so self-possessed and expansive. He thanked his publishing team, his editor, me. He mentioned my advice to trust the book, and said he was glad that he did, because it felt incredible to have the truth out there, to feel, his voice caught, free. There were tears in his eyes. Mine too. And yet, once a ghost, always a ghost. I couldn't help obsessing about that word, free. If he'd used that in one of our Zoom sessions, I'd have pushed back. Harry first felt liberated when he fell in love with Meghan, and again when they fled Britain, and what he felt now, for the first time in his life, was heard. That imperious Windsor motto, never complain, never explain, is really just a prettified omerta, which my wife suggests might have prolonged Harry's grief. His family actively discourages talking, a stoicism for which they're widely lauded, but if you don't speak your emotions, you serve them, and if you don't tell your story, you lose it, or what might be worse, you get lost inside it. Telling is how we cement details, preserve continuity, stay sane. We say ourselves into being every day, or else. Heard, Harry, heard. I could hear myself making the case to him late at night, and I could see Harry's nose wrinkle as he argued for his word, and I reproached myself once more. Not your effing book. But after we hugged Harry goodbye, after we thanked Megan for toys she'd sent our children, I had a second thought about silence. Ghosts don't speak? Says who? Maybe they can. Maybe, sometimes, they should. Several weeks later, I was having breakfast with my family. The children were eating, and my wife and I were talking about ghostwriting. Someone had just called, seeking help with their memoir. Intriguing person, but the answer was going to be no. I wanted to resume work on my novel. Our 5-year-old daughter looked up from her cinnamon toast and asked, "What is ghostwriting?" My wife and I gazed at each other as if she'd asked, "What is God?" "Well," I said, drawing a blank. "Okay, you know how you love art?" She nodded. She loves few things more. An artist is what she hopes to be. Imagine if one of your classmates wanted to say something, express something, but they couldn't draw. Imagine if they asked you to draw a picture for them. "I would do it," she said. That's ghostwriting. It occurred to me that this might be the closest I'd ever come to a workable definition. It certainly landed with our daughter. You could see it in her eyes. She got off her chair and leaned against me. "Daddy, I will be your ghostwriter." My wife laughed. I laughed. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. But that wasn't what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say was, "No, Gracie. Nope. Keep doing your own pictures."
God bless you if you made it to the end. Thank you so much for sticking it out. This is the last note that I'm going to put here. This is J.R. Moringer's wife, Shannon Welch. If she does not look familiar, just know that coincidentally, she is the VP of Penguin Random House. Yeah, so that should tell you a little something about possibly why J.R. Moeringer wrote this piece. The book Spare, yeah, they may be toting that it was the fastest selling book. We all know that the numbers were inflated, as well as we know that they paid people to write those reviews on Amazon, as well as delete reviews of people who actually bought it and hated it. Let's just say that I guarantee the Harkles probably paid additional money to the ghostwriter to fix up the image because, hey, Harry's got, 3 more books to write? And right now, he's not looking so good. I think the United States right now is so fed up and sick of this couple that they are really pushing hard to clean up the mess that they have made over the last 5 years. I think they're making it worse. This just makes J.R. Moeringer look even more thirsty and pathetic. And then to see that his wife is the VP of Penguin Random House, that should tell you one or two things on what is going on here. So be on the lookout. We're going to see more of this kind of garbage coming into our media, especially being pushed by the left. Yeah, we're going to have to expose it and out it. I don't blame you if you don't want to listen to it because it is so annoying at times, but also comical. This makes them look so pathetic. And let's not forget, we're going to be saturated this week with them in the media. And then next week, Megzy is going to be in New York City for her BS Paid Award and her photo op with Glow, her best friend. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I appreciate you guys spending the time with me. I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
You're such a fraud.